Good morning. My name is Jamie Springer. I'm a senior principal with HR&A Advisors, and we're a strategy consulting partner for the 100 Resilient Cities Initiative. I'll be talking to you a little bit more throughout the day, but without any further ado, to really get us going and give us a welcome, I wanted to introduce Jonathan Smith, who's our host today, Special Assistant to the President of St. Louis University for Diversity and Community Engagement.
Good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you to Il Monastero here at St. Louis University, a Jesuit Catholic International Urban Research University located here in the center of our city. And I wanted to make sure to get all of those out because my boss, President Fred Costello, who was unable to be here today because he's traveling, would want me to make sure that you knew that those are all of the things that we are. A few of those that are particularly important, I think, for this gathering this morning as we welcome you here is the fact that we're a Jesuit university, which gives us a very particular mission, and we're proud to have a mission that allows us as an academic institution, as an urban research university, to have a heart for the people of our city, to be able to declare as a part of our mission that we exist in solidarity with the citizens of our city, and that we have a preferential option for those who are disadvantaged, for those who are poor. We are an urban university, and we take it as an incredible part of our mission that means we have to be connected to all of our neighbors, that we do not simply sit in a bubble inside the city, but that we are a part of the city, and that, as Dr. King lets us know in his letter from a Birmingham jail, he lets us know that we exist in a network of mutuality, and he lets us know that what affects one affects all, and we are happy to host this gathering where we begin to think about what is it that we need as a city to be resilient when we look at our challenges, whether they are chronic or acute. And we have learned over the last year that there are some very critical connections between our acute problems and our chronic problems. And it is absolutely necessary that we figure out what those things are. So we are ecstatic to welcome you here today, to welcome all you minds here today, to help us figure out what is it that we do well, what is it that we need to do to make sure that we are a resilient city. And the second thing I am here to do this morning is to introduce to you our four-term mayor, who is an alum of this wonderful institution, who is a graduate of our law school, and who, over the course of his term, I'm not a native St. Louisan, so if you ask me where I went to school, I wouldn't be able to give you a high school. And you would know right away that I'm not from here. But I have enjoyed raising my children here and have really enjoyed the last decade or so watching the neighborhoods of our cities transform, watching stretches of our city that used to look beyond resuscitation, to see those neighborhoods now thrive, to see new families and new faces in the neighborhood. We have many challenges ahead of us, but I am so glad that our alum, Mayor Francis Slay, has been in charge of that. So join me in welcoming the Mayor of the City of St. Louis, the Honorable Mayor Francis Slay.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Good morning, everyone. We certainly appreciate the St. Louis University's involvement in this entire effort, and certainly for allowing us to be here in Il Monastero, just a beautiful place, I think, for this kind of event. The last time I was here, we were working on our Youth Violence Prevention Task Force. We kicked it off. We had a lot of stakeholders, some of whom are here again today to try to address violence, particularly among our youth in St. Louis. But we are very, very pleased. I am pleased to see so many individuals and so many companies and organizations and social service agencies and civic organizations represented here this morning. This is an effort that that's right here in front of us and something that we need to make sure we take full advantage of. So I'm very encouraged looking around the room, seeing so many people that are here to work with us to make St. Louis a better place for everyone. We have people from city government. I have a lot of people from my staff and my cabinet here as well. I'd like to have them all stand and just say hello, and just wave. And so these are some of the people that I rely on in city government to address many of the issues we'll be talking about. We have the people from the philanthropic community, the education community, business and nonprofit leaders, as well as activists and advisors, all very important to the discussion that we are embarking upon. You and the organizations you represent are an excellent sample of the very best we have to offer here in St. Louis, people who care deeply about our community, people who are stepping up to try to make sure we do things that will help improve opportunities and upward mobility, and to address some of the shocks and the stresses that we're going to be talking about as we go through the day today. You will all have spent countless hours leveraging your time and energy to make St. Louis a better place to live and to grow. So I want to thank all of you for joining us here today. I also want to thank the entire 100 Resilient Cities team and give a special welcome to Bryna Lipper and Olivia Stinson, both of whom you will hear from today. 100 Resilient Cities is giving us unprecedented assistance and access to people and programs around the world to help St. Louis. We also welcome Brenton Mock, a writer for the City Lab, and our keynote speaker this afternoon. Thank you for joining us here today. We will ask all of you to consider how best we should handle major shocks to our city, and while addressing those slow burner stresses that contribute to the shocks. This is what we're going to be talking about today, but something we're going to be working on far into the future. We couldn't do it without you. Thanks again to all of you, and to tell you a little bit more about today, let me introduce you to Don Rowe, who is the Director of Planning and Urban Design for the City of St. Louis. Don?
Thank you, Mayor Slay. Good morning. First off, what I'm going to do is introduce a little bit more about the team from RC100. It's an extensive team. You'll understand that the resources that they will bring to us will be extensive. Their experience is extensive. There's three I want to make mention about that you'll see during the course of the day. Bryna Lipper is the Vice President for Relationships at 100 Resilient Cities, and is here in St. Louis for the first time in a long time. RC100 is a global undertaking, and Ms. Lipper reflects that in being a graduate of the University of Sydney and Harvard Kennedy School of Government. She has worked around the world, doing so in both the private, for-profit, and nonprofit sectors, taking on roles in policy formation, urban design and placemaking, along with assisting underserved communities. Most recently, prior to RC100, she held a director's level position at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, involving philanthropic partnerships and policy innovations. Quite the undertaking at HUD. So we welcome her to be part of our team. Olivia Stinson has been here often in the last several months since becoming an associate director for 100 Resilient Cities and our St. Louis liaison to RC100. Olivia is a planner, so we bonded. Currently with RC100, she is working with North American cities. So we have that cross-pollination with our fellow RC100 cities in North America. She's worked for the World Bank on challenges of urban poverty, climate change. She's worked in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, and in Colorado, my former home, after major flooding brought havoc to that state. She speaks of her planning interest having been stimulated by her involvement in the Highline Linear Park in Manhattan. During her visits to St. Louis, she has been many points in our city and our region, from crowded ice cream establishments to early morning visits to neighborhoods with lone kids waiting for the school bus. Olivia is getting familiar with our city. Jamie Springer, who you met, he's the man with the wireless mic. I've known the longest. He's a senior principal at HR&A Advisors in New York. He has extensive experience in public sector management, economic development, and community relations. He served on special assignment for community initiatives in the New York Mayor's Office and is working with multiple RC 100 cities. Jamie, however, as we go, I know from his work in St. Louis. He's worked on the City Arch River project, the St. Louis Zoo expansion planning and economic development work for their site across from the zoo, that was the old Forest Park Hospital, and he's worked along Delmar and the streetcar route and an economic development plan. So those are our team members, the lead team members from RC 100. You'll hear from them during the course of the day, and first up is Olivia Stetson.
Close. I'll stand in for Olivia. She'll be here in a second. I just want to get you situated a little bit, and then we're right into the sort of content and the substance of resilience from Olivia and Bryna. So just a few key points here organizationally and by way of introduction. So first of all, as Don said, I'm very pleased to represent HR&A as a strategy partner to 100 Resilient Cities in working with St. Louis. This is the 7th agenda setting workshop that HR&A has delivered on behalf of 100 Resilient Cities in the last year and a half. And it's a tremendous opportunity and experience. We get a lot out of it, and we also think that when those who are participating really come in with an open mind, an ability to think broadly about a whole range of issues, and we'll get into that shortly, it can be a really transformative experience for the city. So it's very exciting for us. We're helping to deliver the 100 Resilient Cities program in 9 cities, and we're very proud that we've been part of I think the first 2 full city strategies in New York and New Orleans, and almost a third in Norfolk, although there might be a couple others that are finishing as well. But it's been a tremendous experience for us, and we're very pleased to be here. As Don said, I've had the opportunity to work on the Arch and the Loop and the Zoo over the last few years, and those are all physical projects, economic development and physical investment projects. But the thing that I get the most sort of reward and pleasure out of is connecting those physical interventions and those economic interventions to broader questions around the social and economic factors that go into a city's comprehensive resilience. And so that's what we're very pleased to have that context about St. Louis, but now begin to broaden that and think about how that fits into all of the shocks and stresses that the city needs to be prepared for. So I'm the sort of lead facilitator for the day, and I'll be taking you through the agenda and setting up the exercises and so on. The workshop itself will get set up a little bit more in a few minutes, but I think most of you know this is the kickoff for St. Louis's participation in the 100 Resilient Cities initiative. And you'll hear more about exactly what that means, but you're here at the kickoff, and the intention is for you to be here as key stakeholders throughout the process of creating a strategy and moving the city forward. And so, as I started to mention before, we just ask you to be here with fully open minds and ready to participate and contribute both your expertise and your insights and your thoughts and your emotions. There's a lot of really important issues to get out on the table here, and that's really the goal today, is to get the issues out on the table so that there's a lot of meat that the city and the CRO can start to organize around. In order to have that fully open mind, I just make one pretty conventional request of you, which is to please silence your cell phones and don't spend the whole day checking your email. We have built in some pretty good breaks into the day, so you know, we're very pleased to see everyone you know, in the corner of the room catching up during those breaks, although we certainly would like you to interact with each other as well. But please don't spend a lot of time checking your email today. Please keep it in your pocket, and I've noticed everyone is doing that so far, which is really good. But it can be a long day because there's a lot to get through, so I ask you just to bear with us. So to set up what we're up to, let me just do a quick overview of the agenda. We're here until 6, but we're really working in this room until 4:30, and then we have a reception. So what we're going to have next is the sort of introduction to 100 Resilient Cities and to resilience from Bryna and Olivia, and then we'll hear from the mayor again a little bit more specifically about his thoughts on St. Louis's resilience. Then we have a series of 4 exercises that will take us through the day. And basically the arc of those exercises is to sort out a little bit at the tables as you introduce yourselves what your definition of resilience is, and then to get out there some assessment of risk, how you understand risk, which we generally refer to as shocks and stresses. Then that's the second exercise. The third exercise is St. Louis's vulnerability to those risks. So assessing the different components of the city, and that's small c city, not big C city, those different components of the whole city, how it's vulnerable to risk. And then the last exercise at the end of the day is getting out there what you think the major assets and opportunities are for addressing those risks and those vulnerabilities. I'm going to set up each of those exercises in turn, but I wanted to give a broad overview of what we're doing throughout the day. And in between, as someone mentioned, we're very pleased we have Brenton Mock for a keynote address at lunch. So we'll have a few presentations, get into the exercises with a keynote at lunch, and then move into the reception at 4:30. That's the agenda. And so now we have a great opportunity to begin to get into the content with a presentation from, I think, starting with Olivia and Bryna shortly after that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia Stinson with 100 Resilient Cities, and I'm an associate director I'll be working with St. Louis through the Life of You program, and as Don mentioned, has been here a few times and absolutely love it here, and have enjoyed meeting everybody I've met so far, so I'm really thrilled for this turnout and look forward to chatting with you today. So I'm just going to do a very brief run through of our program. That's just at a high level so you can understand how our program's structured globally, and then I'll turn it over to Bryna. She's going to talk a little bit about the concept of urban resilience that we bring through the program, and some of the tools you're going to be using today. So I'm just going to talk about our grant program and so you can understand what's all going to look like. Let's see. So 100 Resilient Cities is a program of the Rockefeller Foundation. There's a number of resilience-focused programs there, but this is their biggest investment. And they developed the program at their 100th birthday, and they wanted to do something really large-scale and catalytic across the world, working with local governments. And they targeted building resilience in cities at the local government level. So we decided to take on 100 cities around the world and challenge them, this is called the challenge, to address the issues of their shocks and stresses. We work to help support the cities to do this. So we bring resources to the city and ask you to engage around all this great work to try to become more resilient on your own terms. Right now we have 67 cities in our network. We've had more than 700 cities around the world apply for the program. St. Louis is in round 2. So out of 35 cities in round 2, there were more than 300 applicants. So this is a very competitive program. We're going to have our last 33 cities chosen in the first quarter of 2016. So we actually have our application for round 3 open right now, and then we'll have our portfolio 100 at the beginning of 2016. So we're really happy to have you here. You should look at your company that you're keeping. This is definitely a global program. So there's 2 key problems that we've kind of identified in this program to talk about why cities should take on resilience. The first is that they're complex yet siloed ecosystems. And I think the critical part here is systems. We're talking about city systems. Cities are siloed within city government, but they're also silos themselves within the larger ecosystem of the city, small c. So how do we start to address that and to break through some of the silos and collaborate? The second is that this points back to the scale at which the foundation is taking on this challenge, which is that solutions don't scale. So if we take 100 cities and we have 100 cities around the world working on resilience, how can we start to share these solutions that they're coming up with? We believe that city governments are going to innovate at their own level, but that they're able to find also like critical innovations that they can share with each other. So how do we start to create this movement of change across the world? There's basically three ways that we're trying to address this trend of urbanization. So part of the reason we're taking on cities is that urbanization is rapidly occurring around the world. City governments and cities are at the front lines of climate change, of civil unrest, of inequity. And so we need to invest at the local level where we feel like there's a tremendous point of impact. So what we're trying to achieve, there's three key things. One is that obviously that the cities themselves will benefit. We hope that when we bring our program to St. Louis, you're all going to do this amazing work with your government, with your partners, and you're going to feel change. You're going to have a resilient strategy here in your own city. So that's of course critical. The second is that you're going to be actually part of the process of fostering this whole practice. So between all of our member cities, all the partners that we talk to the governments about making, all the inclusion, the kind of inclusive nature of the program and reaching out to private sector, public sector, nonprofit partners to build resilience in the citywide, that you're actually all contributing to this global practice that we're helping to foster. And finally, we're creating a market for resilience tools. So by having 100 cities participate and aggregating all their needs and their shocks and stresses, we're actually going to be able to talk to the market. I think this is a really critical part of this program and really kind of an enlightened way of looking at saying that cities just don't operate in and of themselves, that by creating demand, we can actually affect the way that the market's doing innovation and engage with the market, that the private sector and other service providers are critical to this entire story and they're part of this global practice. So it's pretty ambitious and you're going to be a part of that. And this just kind of points to, this is the overall view of the program. How are we going to create this practice together? So just to quickly go through the 4 types of support that we offer, it's not a conventional grant program where we just give a cash grant to the city to execute a project. It's very partnership-based, both with the 100RC, but also with our platform partners, with our strategy partners. Jamie was talking to us, and it's a very kind of collaborative program, so not typical philanthropy. The first is the Chief Resilience Officer. So this is the person who will be hired by the city. You all have your job description posted publicly. I believe right now it's still open. And I know it's a very in-demand position, I understand. So get your resumes in if you're interested. But this person is hired by city government. They're located at a fairly senior level. The key is they're going to be the one who's heading up the resilience strategy. So they're working across government silos. They're building partnerships outside of the city with other stakeholders. They're promoting resilience thinking. They're coming back to the network and working with the network of other 100 cities internationally also, representing St. Louis on the global stage. So they have a big job, but this is a really, really critical part of the entire program because this is the person that is going to be able to convene everyone in St. Louis to talk about this, but also represent back to the international stage and contribute to that thinking. Bring all the great thinking from your city to other cities. The second is the strategy development process, and this is kind of in some ways the first step in this. This is what the workshop is the first step in creating a strategy for your city to build resilience. And this is led by the CRO who develops working groups, steering committees, outreach to create an actual strategy for the city. It's generally about a 9-month process in the first part of the grant, where the beginning is to kind of do a stock taking. What's going on in the city already? Where does St. Louis stand in resilience? Let's take a look at where we are, and then let's develop some focus areas. Let's develop some key areas, some priority areas of intervention for resilience. Where are the areas of impact? Those should be collectively decided through a really, really inclusive process that we continually reinforce. That's part of the silo breaking down that's critical to the program. So that's the first charge of the Chief Resilience Officer, is the strategy process. The latter half of it, we go into implementation. The program supports implementation through a platform. They're called our platform partners, and we actually have some platform partners here today. And there's a tear sheet in your packet. If the platform partners could stand up or raise your hands. Thank you for being here. They represent organizations, companies, private sector, public sector, who are partnering with us to help offer solutions and help with the implementation of some of the focus areas that the city comes up with. So they're not supposed to simply carry out, they're not the technical partners that will simply carry out the work, but they're incredible technological and consulting resources that we can offer to the city for you to all just start to actually do some things that you've identified, usually pairing those with city resources. So we're very lucky. We have about 60 different organizations and companies on our platform with about 90 services. It's this vast wealth of support we're able to offer. Finally is the network, which I touched on a little bit at the beginning. And this has actually been in this grand experiment that we're doing with 100 cities and this very ambitious, aggregating all this information from 100 cities around the world. We have this incredibly powerful network now. We have chief resilience officers. I think we have a little more than 30 right now. Sometimes it's taking a little more to recruit, but we have this incredibly powerful network of people that are sharing ideas, and we're convening everyone in a yearly summit. We have one in 2 weeks in Mexico City. So to be able to bring all the chief resilience officers together to talk about what they're facing in their cities, how they're going through their strategy, what challenges are they facing in building partnerships. It's a really, really fascinating and I think pretty unusual venue to have chief resilience officers who didn't even really exist a couple of years ago, now leading the charge on for cities around the world. So very excited to be here, and that's our program. Happy to answer any questions at any time during the break. I'm going to turn it over to Bryna Lipper, our VP, who will take you through a little bit more about urban resilience and our framework. Thanks.
Thanks, Olivia. First of all, I hate standing at a podium. I'm usually a walker, so this might be difficult for me, just being placed in this position. So introduction to urban resilience. So first of all, we all know that the world is urbanizing, right? We know the statistics that it's projected by the year 2050, 70% of our global population will live in cities. We can see the trend lines from the year 1900 to 2050. And in parts of the developing world, parts of Asia and Latin America, that projection of 70% is already at 80%. So cities are the epicenter of pretty much everything in the world these days. Whoops, I skipped ahead. And we also know that in the future, when we have 70 and 80% of the world's populations in cities, the city is going to have to provide different kinds of essential services. The city is stressed in delivering those services, and the city is facing different kinds of compression and shocks and stresses that they're having to grapple with for the future. On the left-hand side, my left-hand side, we see Myanmar, the city of Mandalay in Myanmar. You see the instance of flooding compounded with the fact that the city has been unable to deal with the rapid stresses of growth and transportation and physical infrastructure development. On the other side of the screen, you see Pittsburgh here in the United States, and you see the stresses of economic decline and basically the collapse of the steel manufacturing industry within the United States. When we talk about resilience, we're largely talking about the fact that shocks and stresses within cities intersect. When we have physical disruption or man-made disruption of acute shocks, everything ranging from tornadoes, hurricanes, and cataclysmic events in cities, we also know that those instances are compounded and unfortunately undermine the city's fabric and ability to operate when we have ongoing chronic stresses. Issues like social cohesion, crime and violence, acute poverty. The intersection of shocks and stresses is the mandate of the cities of tomorrow. How we grapple with that kind of future is the objective of urban resilience. One of the things in urban resilience theory, or resilience theory at large, is how the city performs during these times of shocks and stresses and the city's actual ability to rebound. You can see from this chart that when we think about the path of development of a city, of any different city, the normal path of progress is along that green dotted line. But what happens when we have an acute instance in a city? What happens when we have a major hurricane hit, or a tornado hit our city, or a terrorist attack hit our cities? Will we actually use that moment to reinvent ourselves and rebound and grow and develop, or will we face further decline? Will we fall into disrepair? Will we be unable to reinvent our city, use the moment to learn, adapt, and grow, and unfortunately be unable and unprepared for the results of providing for our citizens, our culture, and our future within cities? So, acute shocks. I've provided earlier a quick summary of some of the things that are very well known when we think about resilience. These cataclysmic events that unfortunately hit our cities at one moment in time and can be catastrophic for a city. We know that they are both man-made as well as natural. Chronic stresses, again, are some of these issues that over decades, over years, even over centuries, disrupt our cities and pull apart the fabric of our society. We can also see from this list that they're both man-made as well as natural. Issues like lack of affordable housing, unfortunately in cities in the United States, are compounding the issue of economic development and economic growth. We're seeing suburban sprawl, unfortunately, intersect with the fact that people are unable to get to affordable jobs and spending over 50% of their income. Those are the types of stresses that we think are major resilience issues in our cities moving forward and into the future. So we wanted to talk a little bit about a case study, a few case studies as we move forward to just get your mind thinking about how to explore resilience. So the picture behind me shows a Toyota factory in Turkey. And I don't know if your memory can go back to about a decade ago. There was a major cataclysmic earthquake in a province outside of Istanbul in an urban area in Turkey. And this Toyota factory was designed by the engineering firm, the global engineering firm Arup, at a specification to take a shock to withstand more than an 8-point Richter scale earthquake. The extraordinary engineers at Arup did a magnificent job, because what you see behind me is an image of that Toyota factory and the surrounding infrastructure after a greater than 7-point Richter scale earthquake. I believe it was a 7.4 in the area. You barely see any kind of disruption in this photo. You can see that the roads are sort of free and clear, and it doesn't even look like a brick has fallen from the city. Unfortunately, in the developed area outside that is supporting the Toyota factory, the workers were unable to arrive at that Toyota factory. Unfortunately, the communication system had completely collapsed within the city. Unfortunately, the critical services such as water and food transportation were completely disrupted for almost a month in this area. Unfortunately, over 50,000 houses and other structures completely collapsed. So this doesn't matter unless you have all of the other pieces and systems in place within a whole urban fabric to have a strong set of institutions, physical infrastructure, natural works that are designed and developed in an integrated way to make the city strong and able to withstand shocks and stresses. So urban resilience, as we defined it, is the ability, the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, and businesses, the whole city. When we say lowercase c, this is what we mean. We don't mean the city government. We mean everything within the city and all of the participants. To survive, adapt, and grow, no matter what kind of chronic stresses or acute shocks that they experience. And I think that this is a really important concept that we've been evolving a lot around the world is, would it matter, really, if it was a tornado that struck here tomorrow, or if it was a terrorist attack, unfortunately? How would we be prepared for both kinds of instances in terms of a shock and be able to rebound? Because we are uncertain exactly of what the next generation brings for us, what the next 50 years brings for us. And that's our task, is to prepare for that uncertainty no matter what. So the City Resilience Framework starts out with thinking about some concepts of what are the qualities, what are the characteristics that cities exhibit, what do they demonstrate when they're demonstrating resilience? And 100 Resilient Cities, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the firm Arup, who I just mentioned, have been working for many years on developing what we call the City Resilience Framework. Concepts that help us understand how cities exhibit resilience and how they practice resilience. Some of those characteristics that we see on the left-hand side, you can see that cities are reflective and they're able to learn and they're resourceful. So these are the individual characteristics and the characteristics of organizations. Are you able to repurpose today your people, your staff? Are you nimble? And can you use tools and resources in different ways than they were actually designed for? The three in the middle talk about being robust, flexible, and redundant. Those are oftentimes what we think about in the design of physical systems. Are they strong enough? Are they flexible so that you can use them in different ways? How could our dike system, for example, be also designed in a way that provides other commercial goods and tools and services? And are they redundant? So what happens when our energy system fails us? Do we have other alternative systems of energy in place? And then what you see with integrated and inclusive systems are both the notion that our institutions, our government, our organizations have a point of view, that everyone's point of view is essential. And that the value of everyone, not only in this room, but everyone in our community, should be a participant in our future. And when we design inclusively, we have a stronger, healthier, more resilient city. And then being integrated is looking at the system side of that. Have we designed for those people to participate? Have we designed our organizations and businesses in ways that those people can filter in and become productive? So the City Resilience Framework is divided into, I'm going to get frameworky on you all now, okay? I hope you don't mind. You're going to have to practice this really soon. So framework concept, characteristics, you'll exercise those later, so remember those. The City Resilience Framework also has 4 different dimensions. Leadership and strategy, health and well-being, economy and society, and infrastructure and environment. And I'll tell you, I described to the group last night over dinner that my job, being the head of relationships for the organization, is not a dating service, although I'm happy to matchmake here today. The head of relationships, my job is to be kind of the mother of all of our cities, our 100 cities around the world. And I'll tell you a little tidbit as we look at this framework today and these 4 dimensions. The leadership and strategy, the people that participate and collectively want to adapt society, this is one of the areas that continues to come up, whether we're talking about New York City or whether we're talking about Durban, South Africa. How you actually participate in leading your city into the future to make it stronger is a key part of building resilience in the city. The City Resilience Framework has 12 different drivers, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail in just a moment. But within those 4 different dimensions, we have 12 different drivers that we can actually see and measure and understand if cities exhibit these kinds of drivers or how they contribute to them in building resilience, where you're strong, where you're weak. So I wanted to take you through yet another case study. New York City. This is the tale of the 2 blackouts of New York City. So this is 1977. And there was extraordinary disharmony in the city of New York. New York City, in addition to having a great deal of social unrest, racial injustice, divestment in the city, disrepair in the boroughs, New York City also was reinforcing its physical development to amplify those kinds of things. They built what's called, and maybe some of you know, the Cross Bronx Expressway, which created a divide between poverty and opportunity, races, people who settled in New York with very little, and that barrier divided those who had some things and had access to the economic opportunity and those who would not. New York City, for decades, unfortunately, also saw a lack of divestment from the national government, as you might know. And unfortunately, those conditions within New York City and the crime and violence that followed had a major shock and came to a major explosive event in the summer of 1977 when there was a blackout in the city. And as you can see from this image, there's an incredible amount of looting in Brooklyn and the Bronx. If you will remember, it was called the city on fire at one point. You can see from this image instances of police brutality and conflict where there was a lack of trust between formal public sector institutions and those who felt betrayed by their governments. And then, let's leap forward to almost the exact same instant in the summer of 2003. So a generation later, the exact same shock hit New York City. And this is what happened in New York City at that time. That kind of looting, crime, and violence, the burning of the city, the unrest, the kind of conflict and lack of cohesion that exploded in New York City did not happen in 2003. In fact, people walked home in an orderly way and helped one another. It was a little bit of a traffic mess, as is always in New York City, but the kind of eruption, the kind of shock that befell New York City did not take place. And we wonder why that is, and I'm going to explain sort of in a rear view mirror how we saw the resilience of New York City in 1977 versus today and all of those drivers that I just described. So if you'll go back to the City Resilience Framework, the first driver is around the health and well-being of everyone living and working in the city. This is about those individuals and meeting their basic needs, supporting their livelihoods, and ensuring public services. The second driver, dimension with the 3 drivers is around the social and financial organizations that enable those populations to live peacefully and exist and act collectively and have that opportunity. So we see in this that cities are fostering economic prosperity, ensuring social stability, and promoting cohesion. The third dimension is really around how natural and physical infrastructure, the things that we build and the things that we had when we came into our environment, are protected and connected to those urban citizens. So reliable communications and mobility and transportation. Continuity of those critical services, whether those critical services are energy services or your deployment of water services. providing and enhancing natural and man-made assets. So how are we protecting our water supply, or the quality of our air for today as well as for tomorrow? And then finally, leadership and strategy, which I challenged you to think about in this environment in particular, is about effective leadership, empowered stakeholders, and integrated planning. How do we have effective managers and leaders across the different sectors of government, but also within society? Some of you today who are from the local institutions or the businesses, how are you cooperating and collaborating with your public sector and your government? Fostering long-term and integrated planning. So as Olivia said early, we're a lot about silo busting in our organization because we have seen one of the most detrimental aspects to resilience is when the Department of Transportation doesn't see the nexus between long-term planning and affordable housing. And that there's not a nexus between that and the economic growth and the businesses that we want to attract to our city. That kind of silo busting is your task. And then when we get really frameworky, we will divide this even further, and your Chief Resilience Officer will help you come up with a metrics and a way to measure this even further. So we have a variety of different sub-drivers that help us understand each one of those 12 drivers. So New York, let's go back. When we look at these 12 drivers in New York City, we will see that in the red hotspots, New York was failing its citizens miserably. Of course, it wasn't safeguarding human life and its health. There was no kind of collective identity and support. The city had very little security and stability. There was a great deal of corruption in the public sector at the time in New York. And unfortunately, as I said before, there was great divestment in the city, whether it be from the federal government, the local government, or even business and industry. Everything yellow here was also behaving poorly or marginalized. And New York in 2003 had a very, very different picture among these 12 drivers. You can see how New York improved radically across these different dimensions and drivers to make its city strong, resourceful, and resilient, so that when it had the identical shock years later, it was able to rebound much faster. One more case study, and this one's my favorite, because this one came about as we had our very first workshop last year for 100 Resilient Cities in Medellin, Colombia. I don't know if any of you know who that gentleman over on the other side. I need crowd answers in this one. Pablo Escobar. So Pablo Escobar is known as being one of the most violent characters in our modern history. He was the leader of Colombia's drug cartel, and he was an individual who essentially set out a reign of terror in Medellin, Colombia, in the city over the course of 2 decades. And what you see on the other side is a guerrilla group known as the FARC. The FARC also set out acts of violence and undermining of city systems and urban systems because their focus was about independence and justice for those who, in their view, had little or no access to formal opportunity and faced corruption against the governments of Colombia. What a lot of people actually don't know about these 2 different kinds of organizations, the drug cartel and Pablo Escobar and the FARC, were that unfortunately they were the ones that were providing services, providing resources, providing jobs and opportunities for people who didn't have them otherwise because there were no alternatives. The government was not operating and was operating with a great deal of corruption. So if you're a young man in 1980s Colombia and you wanted to earn a decent living, you had no alternative other than to work with one of these different institutions, unfortunately, within the city of Colombia. If we look at Medellin, Colombia, we recognize that in the 1980s, they were incredibly weak at ensuring those public health services, social stability, and justice, providing any kind of economic opportunity or stability. And as we go around the wheel, we can see that the city of Medellin was in great disrepair and great conflict. It was voted in 1989 the most violent place in the entire world. When I went to Colombia, when I went to Medellin a couple of years ago when we first selected them, I saw something very, very different. And that was a city that had undergone an extraordinary renaissance. From the city that had the most murders in the entire world, Pablo Escobar's death set out a new opportunity. So something magical happened in his neighborhood. It's called the neighborhood of Comuna 13. And it was a very impoverished part of the city, up on the mountains that were susceptible to landslides, but also had no access to that formal opportunity. There was nothing going in, nothing going out except drugs, crime, violence, and grief. And a group of mothers, after Pablo Escobar was killed, said that this is not good enough for our children of our city. And we need to create access to that opportunity, and we need to connect to the city, and we need ways for our citizens to become formal. So a group of mothers started working with city engineers, as you can see in this image, and they said, it's simply put, we just need ways to get in and get out. And so they started designing what became very famous in the decades later, called the escalators of Comuna 13. They were simply these ideas of if we could just have stairs or escalators coming in and out, we could get our people in and out, they could go get jobs and they could move around. Simple idea, right? What ended up happening was the redevelopment of Comuna 13 is one of the most innovative hubs of urbanism around the world. And what happened was that group of mothers said, it's not good enough now to just have access and egress. We want schools now. And we want safety and security. So you can see with the image on my left, you can see how these escalators had buildings comprised around them and art built around them and community centers and safety centers and eyes on the street in this one neighborhood that was the most violent place in the world. And then the city said, we're onto something. We know mobility, access to opportunity, and crime and violence and family cohesion is a part of our resilience for the future. So they did not stop there. Medellin, Colombia became one of the world's epicenters for redevelopment around this concept of mobility and access. So they built these series of gondolas, these extraordinary engineering feats going up to those hills to provide that kind of opportunity, affordable opportunity. And they built affordable housing all around that. So these informal people who had never had access, all of a sudden did. And then they built an incredible bus rapid transit system around the city and started looking at how to integrate all of these different systems for those who had not. So Medellin, Colombia went from being the most violent, deadly place in the world to, flash forward, an incredible hub of innovation and resilience for the world to match. And so as we begin to see what Medellin exhibited in those qualities, they were incredibly resourceful, repurposing how they would use their money, repurposing their city engineers to work with mothers. They were completely flexible. They didn't just say, we're going to create a subway system. They thought, gondolas, we need to get up hills. And of course, their biggest focus was on that integration and inclusivity. They thought in the first principles that this needed to be opportunity for everyone in our city, particularly the most poor and vulnerable. And with that, I encourage you to explore the qualities and the characteristics of resilience today for the city of St. Louis. It's a great privilege to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bryna. And we are absolutely thrilled as a city to have been chosen by the Rockefeller Foundation to be one of the 100 resilient cities around the world. And we are in really good company. There are a lot of cities, some of them were mentioned here this morning: Athens and Bangkok, Barcelona, London, Boston, Berkeley, Dallas, Pittsburgh, and about 60 other cities as well around the world. And what is really encouraging is that this is something that the Rockefeller Foundation and 100 Resilient City Organization is very good at. They have a lot of experience, as you can hear, as you heard from Bryna, listening to her, seeing her enthusiasm, her knowledge, and the resources that we are going to be able to access outside of the city from other places in the world. And the talent that we have in this room, I have no doubt that we will seize upon this opportunity and do something great for our future. If it can be done in Medellin, Colombia, it can be done here in the city of St. Louis. God knows we have our many challenges, and we have certainly a whole lot of strengths. Great people, great organizations in particular, which I think makes our city strong. Many of our strengths are right here in this room. We've started on a list to talk about what some of the strengths and the shocks are that we should be addressing, but we also want to hear from you in terms of what you think we ought to be looking at as well and working on. We're certainly going to start with the endemic, the stress of crime and violence. Too many of our neighborhoods, too many of our neighbors, too many people in the city live with violence. We have high poverty. We have high crime rates. We have seen a lot of challenges that result from that. And as you can see from these various stresses and shocks, they impact each other. And the people that are impacted the most are our most vulnerable citizens, our low income, our seniors, people that don't have the necessary tools to reach, in their minds, successes and what they can be doing to help improve their families, their communities as well. We also recognize that building resilience will involve addressing our aging infrastructure, response to natural disasters, deficits and disparities in education and public health, poverty, as I talked about, economic disparities to help reduce social tensions citywide. We are a big river city. We've had a tremendous amount of shocks from a weather standpoint, whether it's extreme heat and drought or flooding. We've also seen some terrible windstorms as well that cause a tremendous amount of damage. We do have a lot of experience dealing with these various emergencies. We have a well-protected city with levees and flood walls and pump stations. We have an outstanding police and fire department that really does a great job in collaborating with other city departments and our community in addressing some of these, and we've had a lot of experience in that over the years. But there's a lot more that we can do. We need to have greater resilience in addressing and reducing social grievance and tension based on racial and economic disparities in our city. And so this is something that really is something that I am very much drawn to in terms of what this organization can bring to our city. We have seen a tremendous amount of reinvestment and development in the inner city in a lot of different ways, but we've also seen the fragility of these successes certainly after what we've seen in Ferguson and the unrest that followed the tragedy in Ferguson. It has a tremendous impact on our entire community, and that's something I want to focus on as we go forward here. There is, if we didn't, one thing we should have learned from Ferguson is that there's something that occurs in one part of our region, it impacts our entire region. If there's something that happens in one neighborhood, it impacts another neighborhood. This isn't, oh, that happened in Ferguson, or this is the city's responsibility. The responsibilities that we have as a city are truly, in virtually every respect, regional responsibilities. But we know as a city that we are the big city in the region. We have every single challenge you can think of that a city might have. And we have a lot of experience dealing with some of the stresses, particularly with poverty, particularly with racial tension and access to opportunity. But we also know that we fall very far behind in terms of where we really need to be. And what we have learned, I think, from Ferguson is that these social, economic, and racial disparities that we have seen and that we're experiencing are far more deep than many of our constituents, many of the people in our region knew of or even thought was possible. But we in the city of St. Louis know too well that the racial economic disparities really do impact our ability to succeed as a region, make sure to address these stresses and these shocks, and also to make sure that we do everything we can to provide access to opportunity to everybody in St. Louis. Now, we do know that we live in a region with a regional economy, with a regional workforce, and that the challenges that we face, whether it's poverty, whether it's crime, and these are all things that impact the entire region. They're not just the city's issues. So what I want to do is, as we move forward, really put out a challenge to everybody in this room and everybody who's not in this room. We need to do more and better for the most vulnerable in our communities. We need to do more and better for those that are impoverished in St. Louis. We have far too many people living in poverty in the city of St. Louis. We have far too many barriers to access to opportunity, and we have far too much, I would say, lack of interest, so to speak, in too much of our community in terms of addressing these very, very important challenges that we have. If we want to compete as a region, if we want to make sure that we have opportunities, we want to create jobs, if we want to make sure we have a resilient city, I think the most important thing we can do is address the social issues that we really need to address in a very, very, very challenging way. So what I will do is ask everybody in this room to really focus hard on what we can be doing to make sure we take what happened in Ferguson and make something good with it, make something good out of it. What's going to be different in the future? We already have a Ferguson Commission. That commission, I think, was well-staffed. The governor did a great job in putting it together. They did some extraordinary work. They really did a lot of groundwork in terms of providing open access to everybody in the community, listening and coming up with ideas and challenging this region and the state in general, and I hope the country as well, challenging them on things we should be doing more and better of in order to make sure we have a more livable community, a more welcoming community, and a community that will attract people because of the opportunities here in St. Louis. But we have a long way to go in that regard. So we need to ask ourselves, where are we today? Where do we need to be in the future? How are we going to get there, and how each and every one of us is going to be part of the solution, going to be part of the challenge, going to be part of the leadership to bring not just city government and the city of St. Louis itself to a better place, but take a lead regionally and nationally on these issues that are so important to us as a country, as a state, and as a city. Your work today, and as we move forward with the 100 Resilient Cities effort, will shape the future of St. Louis. And as I look throughout the room again, I see so many people who are so talented and care so much about our community, care so much about the people that live in our city, and care so much about making sure we have access to opportunity. And I think that with the resources we're going to be able to have with the 100 resilient cities, the knowledge that they have, the resources, the experience, and of course the commitment and passion by everybody in this room, we are going to make this we're going to be very proud of what we accomplished, and we accomplished together, and that's the only way it's going to happen. So as mayor of the city, certainly want to thank each and every one of you for what you do day in and day out to in your disciplines in your organization to help take a leadership role in improving the quality of life in our city. But make no mistake about it, we have a lot of work to do in our community. And as I said, we will take the lead in the city of St. Louis. That's what we do, and we will do everything we can to bring others in the St. Louis region along with us. We can show people it can and will be done. We are a resilient city, and we are going to continue to be a resilient city as we go forward in the future. But what this will do is allow us to put together the social, economic, and civic infrastructure with proven technology, proven methods to really make St. Louis a city and a region that others will look at even more in terms of addressing some of the more urgent and difficult challenges that cities face. So I want to just thank everyone again, certainly thank the 100 cities, individuals, and the organization itself. We're looking forward to this. We are looking forward to the progress we're going to make. We are going, most importantly, we're looking forward to seeing how we as a region impact individuals' lives in a better way. This isn't just about building things. It's not just about having a governmental infrastructure to address challenges. This is about having the social, economic, and civic infrastructure that's going to be a lot more impactful and a lot more effective in addressing some of the more difficult challenges we face as a city. So thank you again for being here, and at this time I will turn it back over to Jamie and look forward to working with you.